Grayson Grundhoefer. Welcome back, Grayson. We appreciate your time. SicEm365.com, recruiting analyst, and also loves analyzing football and men's basketball. Grayson, thank you very much. So we are not far away from eventually a lot of teams getting into their spring. There are still visits. There are still this and that. Where are we on the calendar of what coaches are doing as far as still getting putting out offers and visits?
Right, so offers are still going out right now. That's a continual process, but obviously the dead period is still going on right now. That's going to end here soon as we, enter into March. That's when guys are going to be able to get on college campuses and go start the spring practices, go see campus in the spring for a visit. I would say you're probably going to see Baylor start to become the most active as far as business on campus goes once they start spring ball, which we don't have a specific date yet, but typically it's kind of around that, March 18th to March 21st, somewhere in there is usually when spring ball starts. And of course it ends towards the end of April. So I think during that time period right there is where you're going to see a lot more visits, a lot more opportunities for guys to get on campus, see campus, and also, for the Baylor staff to continue evaluating guys and evaluate who the priorities are as things kind of trend into this summer, of course, when official visits actually happen.
Grayson, the way that the roster is constructed now with portal and all that, is it harder to project year to year what their focus in a class needs to be? Do you almost have to look at it as like, well, I'm just going to assume they need one of everything first and then build after that?
Sometimes. I think it varies on the position, right? I mean, you kind of look around the roster and it's pretty clear that, regardless of how well they recruit the wide receiver position, they're probably going to have room for at least one transfer going into next year because they're about to lose a whole bunch of seniors and don't have a foundation really in that junior class. You're going to be relying on a lot of young guys mixed and matched with, an older guy or two that you go and add from the transfer portal. But then you go look at the running back position and it's like they're not going to have to take a transfer there for years because they're just loading up there with guys through the high school recruiting pipeline. And I think that's pretty smart because that's a position that typically, guys can come in as true freshmen and be really good. At the running back position. It's very different than some others. So I think you're kind of clearly seeing the positions that they really would like to address through high school recruiting only. And then also you'll get to see some positions that, it's very clear there's going to be a mixture coming in the near future. But I would say, I think that as we've gone, kind of through this time period where the transfer portal becomes bigger and bigger, I still think people kind of forget how important the high school recruiting is. And I think you can also see clearly on the roster positions that they do have to address and that they do have to build depth and, kind of have this pipeline of young talent that's developing, even if they are going to attack the transfer portal to bring in some older guys as well to mix with that.
What do you think an early theme for this offseason is? Or if you had to guess from Dave Aranda when he talks in a couple weeks and he gets inevitably asked about what the theme is, what do you think that'll be?
I think that a big part of that's probably going to be just kind of building on what they did towards the end of last year. I think one thing that, is something that I think does provide caution for Baylor fans was kind of how that 2022 season played out after such a good 2021 season. And kind of the comments made by Dave Aranda during that time period, it really, you kind of got this feeling that everyone got a little too comfortable after that really successful 2021 season. And I think making sure that doesn't happen again is at the forefront, even though this team went 8-5 last year. It's not like they won the Big 12, but there was this feeling of, overwhelming kind of joy and success towards the end of the year, and just making sure it's more about building off of that and trying to actually achieve the things that you want to accomplish as a team, from a college football playoff berth to a Big 12 championship, all of those things, making sure that you're doing the things that can actually get you there, and making sure that you're not having complacency and not having guys that are just happy with the success they had last year. And I'm pretty sure that Dave Aranda is making that a major priority this offseason, and especially this spring where you're trying to bring in a lot of new guys, but also develop the guys on your roster and make sure that you're just kind of building instead of rebuilding.
Grayson, one of the things that Dave Aranda's tenure, the first year, 2-7, then the best team ever as far as record and what they did winning the Sugar Bowl. Then they went back when they fell apart in 23 was a disaster, and then last year was kind of a roller coaster. How important would it be for him just to have something that's just calm, 9-3, 8-4, whatever it might be? People are going to want more than that, but just something that just isn't such an up and down kind of I guess you could say I said roller coaster ride.
It's extremely important. And I think it's something where you look at the schedule and you go, man, this team could start off slow. Like there's a path to that. I'm not saying that Baylor is going to, but you're facing an Auburn program that is clearly trying to change the culture there, and they're investing to be good. SMU, of course, as we saw last year, was a college football playoff team. Arizona State won the Big 12 last year. We're in the college football playoff. They just have a lot of really tough matchups, and so you could see them potentially get off to a slow start, and then the sirens and the alarming starts happening. And I do think I'm with you, though. This program definitely needs to get to a point where the floor becomes a 7-5 or an 8-4 year instead of just these disaster years that they have had in the past. And really, it's gone back even further than Aranda. It's just been a lot of ups and downs throughout the really better part of a decade, really. And so I think that looking at it from that point of view, it's like, all right, how do you get to a point where your floor is this, but then you still also have those high highs? And I do think, the expectation for this year, I think among the Baylor staff, among Baylor players, among Baylor fans, the Baylor community, I think the expectation is for this to be a really, really good team and for this to potentially be a very special season. And so if you fall short of that, it's troubling. If you fall short of those expectations and you end up with a 8-4 type record, it's troubling, but it's not the end of the world. Now, if you fall off a cliff and somehow only win, 5 or 6 games, then that's a really big problem and something they definitely need to avoid. So I do think, to your point, I think it does make a lot of sense to bring that up as far as stability goes. But I also think the expectation of those high highs is still there as well. And I do think there's a path to that this year with this team and kind of the expectation.
Grayson, what do you expect to see from Walker White this spring? What kind of quarterback can Baylor fans expect there? Backing up Sawyer Robertson, and what does it feel like to be going into the year knowing for sure what the quarterback is going to be succession-wise?
This is a really, really talented kid in Walker White. You look at the arm strength, the speed, the physicality that he plays with. He truly is a really, really good athlete. And I know coming out of high school, he made the annual 247 Freaks list because he's special in that regard. From a lifting standpoint to speed to jumping, the athleticism really pops off the screen, but then also the arm talent. Really, really big arm, has a cannon. His biggest the thing that everyone kind of looked at, as far as a knock on him was his accuracy coming out of high school. And I think that's the area that he's going to have to continue to improve upon going into the spring. But I think when people see him throw a football or see him actually go through some live drills, you're going to see a guy that is really, really special at a lot of things. And I think it's going to really jump off the kind of field to a lot of people. And I think that's why Baylor took the chance on him. And potentially you have the quarterback of the future with him going forward. Now, he does need development. He does need some time to develop, which obviously Sawyer Robertson is going to give him this year, as he's going to be the backup most likely, or at least competing for that backup role. But I do think there are some special intangibles there. I think he's going to end up being a really good leader for this football team as well as a very good player. I'm pretty excited about his addition. At least I was when they were able to land him. And I think he's going to be a guy that Baylor fans get really excited about because he was obviously a very highly rated recruit. And for the reasons that I mentioned, just a lot of attributes that really jump off the tape when you watch him play.
So tomorrow's March Madness is right around the corner. Baylor men's basketball's lost 3 straight games, including 2 awful losses back-to-back to Colorado and Cincinnati. I mean, 2 teams you did not anticipate losing to in this stretch, but that's also 4 out of the last 5 they've dropped now at this point, Grayson. I mean, they're hovering right there in the middle of the Big 12. It's looking a little dicey, man, in terms of where they find themselves. How do you feel about where they sit entering this weekend and getting ready to go down this home stretch of these final 3 regular season games, starting with Oklahoma State tomorrow at home?
Well, right now they're at a point where, you're kind of in trouble. And it's not so much you're in trouble from I guess you are in trouble from a tournament perspective. If they were to somehow lose their last 3 games here, which, I mean, the way they've been playing, it certainly is possible. If they lose their last 3, I think they're going to be on the outside looking in when it comes to the NCAA tournament. And that's just the simple reality of it. If they go to the Big 12 tournament and lose that game as well, and you lose 4 straight games to end your season, you're definitely out of the NCAA tournament in my eyes. So then it comes back to the question of, okay, so what do they need to do to get in? I think personally the magic number is they probably need to win at least 2 more games. So if they're able to beat Oklahoma State and TCU, then they lose to Houston, lose in the Big 12 tournament. I still think they're in, but it's probably going to be a 10 seed or a play-in game type team. And the only reason that would happen is because their strength of schedule is still really, really good. And obviously they have the big win over St. John's and a win over Kansas, which unfortunately is not looking as good now as when it actually happened. But I think in general, this is just a Baylor team that's sitting in a really tough place right now. And even if they do make the NCAA tournament, they haven't really shown anything that makes you think they're going to make a deep run. And that's just kind of the reality of it. This team wasn't constructed very well. They've had some injury problems too, which is just kind of compounded on the mistakes that were made this offseason. And so now you're seeing here with a team that has a bunch of guards, doesn't have a lot of guys that can rebound, doesn't have a lot of guys that are really good defenders. And then it just comes down to they're trying to outscore people. And that's really tough to ask when this team still has, the inability to rebound that we've seen from past Baylor teams. There's just a lot of things that this team does not have. And so trying to overcome those on every single night is clearly not working for them. Now, the good news is they still have a very workable schedule. Oklahoma State comes to Baylor tomorrow. That should be a game that Baylor wins, even though Oklahoma State's coming off a big win, their biggest win of the season over Iowa State this week. And then Baylor goes to TCU, a team that beat them earlier in the season in a pretty big upset for Baylor there at Foster Pavilion. So a nice couple game opportunity for Baylor to get back in the win column, potentially cement itself in the NCAA tournament. But if they don't get it done in one of these 2 games and then they lose to Houston, then it's going to kind of be setting up for them to actually have to win that first game in the Big 12 tournament just to get in to the NCAA tournament. So that's kind of where they're sitting right now. It's been a really, really tough season. I think any Baylor fan would probably say it's been a very disappointing season. I also think it's a season that will probably readjust things for Scott Drew and the staff as far as the guys that they recruit, how they utilize NIL, and really just how they attack building a roster in the future.
Thank you very much, Grayson. Appreciate your time. It's amazing to me, and I don't know the percentage of how many minutes that they've played, especially in the Big 12 conference games. It always seems like they're behind. Like they're 8-9, so they've won 8 of 17, but it just seems like in the last 4 to 6 games, it's like they're always behind. Even in a couple of games that I watched them win, they were always behind. And, of course, we know the miracle rally against Kansas. But, man, they dig a hole, and it seems like it's so hard for them to come back. They do, and then by that time they run out of gas other than, again, the game against Kansas. And I think there was a game against West Virginia when they finished it out too. Grayson, thank you very much for your time. You feeling good? Everything good with you?
Yeah, everything's going well, guys. Just trying to enjoy this transition into spring.
Yep.
And, hopefully with football coming right around the corner, things will get even more entertaining for us on the website and just in general.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you, Grayson Grundhoefer, recruiting analyst, football, basketball analyst too, for SicEm365.com.